welcome to the Bleeding Hearts Club, where we alchemize pain into something beautiful together. I'm your co-host, Shrewd. I'm an astrologer who helps people use astrology as a self-reflective tool for healing and growth. And this is my co-host.
Hi, y'all. My name is Stevie. I use they and she pronouns. I'm a tarot reader, Reiki practitioner, death doula, and therapist.
I'm so excited to continue our conversation from the last episode where we were talking about our relationship to ancestors and to death and how prominent that topic is around this time of year. And one of the things that we didn't mention last time that I really wanted to open with today is that, we were talking about how there is a lack of space that's held for death and loss in America specifically. It might be in other countries as well. And one of the kind of glaring ways we can see that in our society is that there is an abject lack of space, held to recognize all of the deaths that we've had due to COVID. And I really wanted to name that because there's been no memorial, that we've lost over 1 million people just in the US itself. It has had major impacts on, everybody's lives as well as like our economy. And it's just not talked about. It's not acknowledged. And I think that that can be a really lonely experience for anybody who's had a personal connection to losing a loved one to COVID, especially if you have, deniers or people in your family that are not really willing to accept reality in that respect. And so we just really wanted to acknowledge that. I've been seeing a little bit of stand-up lately where a stand-up comedian will be like, remember when we all went like nuts during quarantine, or I miss quarantine, it was nice to bake bread all the time. And, there'll be like a heckler in the audience being like, hey, COVID ruined my life. And, the whole set is supposed to be, or like the whole bit of that set is supposed to be about like how fun COVID was for people. And a heckler will be like, hey, like COVID ruined my life. And then the comedian will be like, oh, really? No, it didn't. Tell me one way it ruined your life. And the person will be like, my mom died. And suddenly it's like the energy in the room is completely different because people are forced to confront, like, hey, yeah, like this pandemic is like deadly, like it's hurting people. And so yeah, I thought it was really important to name that because it's happening, it's real, and we have to kind of make space to acknowledge, the very real grief and loss that we've experienced because of COVID. So if you or anyone you love, has experienced that, we're holding space and we're really sorry that you have to navigate that in such an isolated way. So, we're super happy to talk about that on here. If you have anything you want to share, have anything you want to say, if you have any grief that you'd like to be expressed, you can go ahead and email us at bleedingheartsclub.pod@gmail.com, and we would be happy to either hold space for you in our, Gmail or like via email or on our Instagram, via DM. And if you're interested, we can also hold space on the podcast. So go ahead and let us know. What do you got for us, Stevie?
Thanks, Shrew. That is just so important. And I'm glad that you opened up this episode in that way. And I think I've mentioned this in many episodes, but I think the overt denial of the loss, the unprecedented loss during COVID and continuous loss as we are still in COVID, um, doesn't really get space held for it again because people don't want to think about death. Even if it's happening all around you, right in front of you, people don't want to do it. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, and it also really exposes a lot of structural systemic exploitation in the world. Um, Death is political. And yeah, and people also don't really know, not that they don't know, but for some reason or another, it's really hard to integrate that information fully because it's so big. It's so big. But yeah, thank you for bringing that in. I really appreciate it. And echoing everything that Truth said, we are sending you love. We are holding space for you. And if this podcast or our DMs or inbox can be of any support to you, let us know. We're here. Yeah. On the topic of building a connection with death, dying, and grief, even like in a cultural context. This is October, going into November. Um, we're going into Halloween. We're going to Dia de los Muertos. We're going into Undas, which Dia de los Muertos and Undas are happening on November 1st and the 2nd. And it's a good time to continue thinking about cultivating a relationship with death, dying, grief, and loss, and also just joy. Like the fact that I guess the representation of somebody dying, somebody leaving this like physical plane doesn't necessarily mean your connection with them and all that came from it is gone. Like it is very much an ongoing relationship that you're continuing to build and evolve with. And I think that's very beautiful. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about ways to build a relationship with death and dying. Sorry, y'all. I'm going to do it. I have to. Um, I won't jump into it fully because I'm not going to do that to you. But I want to give you some less abstract ways, more concrete ways that you can start thinking about death and your mortality and just the inevitability of it. Um, as y'all know, I'm a death doula. I got my training from an organization called Going with Grace back in January of 2023. So it's been a hot minute, but it was a really beautiful experience that helped me really look at death, understand death, not just on an emotional level, but on a community level, on a systemic level, through different lenses of culture and race and spirituality. And I love it so much. The founder, her name is Alua Arthur. She's a death doula, and she is such a vibrant and I don't even know. Like, there are so many words that I can describe her with, but I'm just going to stick with vibrant. She has a TED talk that we're going to link in the show notes. It's called Why Thinking About Death Helps You Live a Better Life. I know in the past you've probably heard me say that I use death as a North Star to create a life worth living. And I feel like it's very much rooted in the things that I learned from her and learned from my training with Going with Grace, because it is it's inevitable. It is the period at the end of our sentence. It is something that we all experience. And I won't give too much away, but I do encourage you to spend 25 minutes, I think, watching it and really taking it in and letting yourself feel whatever comes up. And hopefully it leaves you a bit inspired and hopeful and grounded. And yeah, it's beautiful. Shrute, you should watch it.
Yes, I will. I'm looking forward to
Yay.
it. The perfect season for that.
Um, Yay, I'm excited. It's so good. It is. It left me crying so much. Another thing that I learned, these are some resources that I've learned from my death doula training, again, that I'm going to pass on to y'all. Um, One of the ways that we can kind of sit with our own mortality is to review the 9 contemplations of death, which come from the 11th century Buddhist scholar. Their name is Atisha. I don't know how to pronounce the rest of their name, but it will be written out in the show notes again. Um,
Deepam Kara Srignana. That's my best guess.
Period.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shrew.
Yeah.
But these are the last 3 of the 9 contemplations. Number 7 is at the time of death, material resources are of no use to us. Number 8 is our loved ones cannot keep us from death. There is no delaying its advent. And then the last one, number 9, is our body cannot help us at the time of death. It too will be lost at that moment. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like those
Some,
speak to values. Like,
yeah.
what are your values in life, and how are those in relationship to your death?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. So if you feel called, hi Maya.
Hi, Maya.
Oh, okay. She's covering my face. Maya.
It's Maya Cam. Maya's the
My
president
fan.
of the Bleeding Hearts Club.
For those who have never seen Maya, Maya's a black cat, so extra, and she's a Scorpio, so extra on the nose here.
She
Hello.
said, you can't have this conversation without me.
Seriously. And again, for also those who don't know, Maya came to me as a ghost, and I will expand on that story a different time.
Yeah, maybe
Just
next
walking
time.
by. I'm not going to feed you right now.
It's not
Mommy's
anywhere near mealtime.
Mommy's talking about death on camera right now.
Literally.
Okay, okay. If you feel called to go through those contemplations, again, it's linked. And I encourage you to not rush through the contemplations. Maybe spend one day with one contemplation, or allow yourself 5 minutes to just be with one contemplation at a time and see what happens. See where your mind goes, see where your resistance shows up, what happens to your body once you sink into a contemplation. Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. It's funny. The one that speaks to me is there are many causes of death. Even habits, desires, and accidents are precipitants. I think that's how you say that word. But I'm chronically ill, and that's kind of a topic that, I was like, oh, I have a personal connection to this because when I was 20 and I first became disabled, when you're 20, you have no concept of like the long term of your life, you're so young. And I remember thinking, when I first became disabled, it was the reason I became bedridden was because I was in excruciating pain and I literally couldn't stand or walk because it was like level 8 pain, level 10 pain. And I remember thinking, there is no way that the human body can endure this much pain for this long because it was daily nonstop for months. In fact, technically years. I was like, there's no way the human body can endure this and not just die. I was like, I'm gonna die. Like, I'm not surviving this. And then the days go on, the months go on, the years go on, and here I still am, nowhere near death. I am very much alive. And I was like, quickly realizing, I was like, death as a coping strategy in this short-term way is not actually helping me at all. Like, it is not alleviating my pain, it is not alleviating my suffering. And what I had to understand was that, I really had to work with my habits, work with my desires, and understand the ways that I was treating myself and living my life were not conducive to life and they were not conducive to my health. And um it gave me like, what I consider one of my greatest lessons, which was that, you know, I am nowhere near dying. So how do I want to live? So it's like a similar vein of what you're saying of death as a North Star, but it was like the inverse almost because it was like, yeah, death's not coming for me, at least in the short term. How am I going to handle this in the meantime? And, that was ultimately the breakthrough that I had that was the seed that planted my astrology business. And that was the seed that planted everything that I do, going forward now. Because it was like, what do you mean I'm in that much pain and I am nowhere near dying, So I feel like it's like interesting how, as much as life is so fragile, and life is also so resilient. And like, it kind of means that our choices have to fall somewhere in the middle of that, where we treat the fragility of our body with honor and respect, but we also treat the resilience of our body with honor and respect. And so I just wanted to name that too, because I think it's worth thinking about. So, I'd love to ask you, listener, like, what's your relationship to death, and what's your relationship to the different, what are they called?
Contemplation.
Contemplations on death. There you go. Yeah, what are we read four of them out here. Like, what do you feel about them? We'd love to hear about that. So feel free to email us, DM us your thoughts. Feel free to send this to a friend, have a chat with your friend. I think this is a great season to open up conversations around death and ancestors. And so we encourage you to um, share this episode, share the last episode before this with somebody in your life, and open up those conversations because we gotta create that space. We gotta normalize what is not normalized in our societies. So I love
When
it.
I have another thing.
Yes.
I have another thing, but like as we're looking for like community ways or kind of playful ways to start thinking about death and dying and our own death, there's also a card game I really need to get my hands on. It's called the Death Deck, and it's a game that you play with other people. It's a literal like card game. You pick a card, it asks you a question, and it gives you like different options. So like, if you when you die, what how do you want people to dress? In all black, in colorful clothing, or in, some secret third thing that I can't remember. But it's lighthearted, but it's real. And if you're looking for something in that zone of vulnerability and connection, that can also be an option. We'll link it. If anybody who loves me is listening to this, can I please have that for my birthday? Thank you.
If you missed CV's birthday and still want to get them a gift, you heard
Mhm.
it here first. Like,
Mhm.
that's what you should get them.
Please and thank you.
Yeah.
There is one more, I'll keep it brief, uh, option or something to kind of contemplate, chew on, whatever words else I can use, um, is to work through the 5 tasks of the living to prepare for a peaceful dying. These steps are adapted from a book called Facing Death and Finding Hope by Christopher Longacre. I hope. I don't know. Um, I don't know how to pronounce anyone's name,
Yeah, I was
honestly.
like, I can't help you there, unfortunately. I don't have any type of education in how to say something like that.
Um, there's more to these, but I'll just name what the tasks are if you are a task-oriented kind of person. The first one is find meaning in your life. Easy. Okay. The second one is to heal your relationships. The third one is to find meaning in suffering and ways to transcend suffering. The fourth one is to build a personal relationship with death, which you now know how to do because I gave you some things. And then the last one, the fifth one, is to make preparations for death because, again, it can happen anytime. We have no idea. And if you're in the US, you probably don't have preparations already arranged. And that leaves a lot for the people who are still Earthside, the people who have to make those arrangements. And if you can do what you can, like building out your advanced directive or just letting people know what you want so that they can honor you the best they can, let them know. Oh, I have another black cat who jumped on the, oh, you're still Maya, on the table. Maybe she came up to clock me because I have not filled out my advanced care directive,
Ooh.
among other things. So maybe we could do it together.
Yeah. I love that. Maya's just looking over your shoulder, like, are you done yet? Did you do it yet?
Did you go? Can I eat now?
Yeah.
Okay. Those are my task, my action items for y'all. Whenever you, yeah, want to have a moment with your mortality. Any thoughts, Shrew?
Yeah, I have two. One, I think that it's really important, and you've said this before, I'm definitely echoing you, that queer people especially need to think about this and they need to talk about this with your chosen family because it's really important that your chosen family has the ability to handle your passing in the way that you want your passing to be honored. And if you don't feel confident enough in your family of origin to be able to handle that, it's really important that you um, know what your queer family wants and also that they know what you want. And me and my closest group of friends, we have had conversations about what our funerals will look like. And we've all made it really clear what we want done with our bodies. And, it doesn't have to be a serious conversation. It wasn't for us. It was a very lighthearted conversation, but I think it's meaningful. Like it can be lighthearted and meaningful at the same time. And even though this is such a, saddening and grief-oriented topic, it's good to know, I think. It's good to really know what the people you love want in regards to their end of life. And so it's important for you to think about that and talk about that with your loved ones. And then I also wanted to give a message to people who really struggle to value the meaning of their lives. Because I completely understand, how futile it all can seem, and how difficult it can feel to hold on. But I just want to name that, like, being alive as a human being is a fleeting experience. And, depending on what you believe, and I'm not going to be out here telling people what to believe or, poking holes in what you believe if it's different from what I believe. But I do think that our experience like as a entity of consciousness, beyond just our physical body and our representation in this lifetime, it extends far beyond, both before this life and after this life. And that's what we cover in astrology with the North Node and the South Node. And that span of time is relatively so much longer than the time that you get to be as a human being here right now. And the beauty about being a human being here right now is that when you are not a human entity zooming around in whatever spiritual plane, like when you're here as a human, you can make changes. You can transform your life. You can transform your body. You can transform, or at least your relationship to your body, if not your actual body. You can transform, your beliefs, what you surround yourself with. There are so many things we can't control. We definitely acknowledge that a lot on this podcast, but, we really try to focus on the areas of our life that we can control, especially in regards to our relationship to ourselves. And you have everything you need just by being a human being to make your relationship to yourself like the most beautiful relationship of your life. And there is such a beauty in that because if you think about every single ghost story, that we hear in our society, cultural zeitgeist, how do you say that word? Like when we think about all these stories, the whole point is that there's unresolved business for this ghost. And, they're desperately wishing that they could be a human being again to resolve it. And if you're ever feeling that tenuous grip to why your life matters and whether it's worth it at all to try to put in that kind of effort, and you're feeling really overwhelmed with how hard everything can be, I just want to name that, like, you know, holding on to that connection even if it's not bringing you something right now, over the course of your life in a long term, you will have been able to transform so much about your relationship to yourself, even without effort, just as a product of growing and aging as a human being. So imagine what you can accomplish if you do put intention and attention toward that. And that to understand that with that in mind, as much as it doesn't feel like it, being alive as a human being is a gift. And to really honor that gift to the best of your ability and understanding that that ability fluctuates, your capacity fluctuates, and to honor that as well. So hopefully that makes sense. And I just wanted to offer that medicine in case you are really struggling with life right now.
Really important medicine. Sending you all love, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. any thoughts? Do we want to move to audience questions?
Yeah, let's move to audience questions.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move to the audience questions. We asked our listeners, we put out an request on our Instagrams, especially the bleedingheartsclub.pod Instagram, and we asked for anybody who had questions relating to their ancestors or any type of death-related question. And we have two fabulous questions we're going to go ahead and answer today. If you don't mind reading them out, Stevie.
Of course. Okay, the first one is okay. I don't know exactly how to word this, but I guess as someone who has cut my family off and whose nasty alcoholic parents were basically severed from their entire family, I've always felt like ancestor work slash connecting with ancestors just isn't for me. No knowledge of familial heritage beyond the immediate generations, and most of them were quite unpleasant. Do I have any ancestors looking out for me? And should I bother trying to spiritually connect with them? Very real, very real, and such a common experience. I have so much I want to say about that, but I'll get into that in 1 second. I pulled a card for this. It is again from the Herb Crafter's Tarot, and the card is Five of Water, which is Five of Cups, and the plant that goes with it is called Golden Seal. I'm going to read the description. I'll also show it on the thing, but y'all, you can find this on our Instagram eventually and TikTok eventually. But the description is old growth trees covered in moss line the bank of a rolling creek in a woodland area. The forest is wet and dripping with life. A stand of golden seal is protected by a barrier of twigs. The young plant is thriving but remains vulnerable. White flowers emerge, bringing hope. Beautiful. Um, okay, with this card, I want to say that it's really important to grieve what ancestral connection you lost, and that you haven't been able to access yet. The stories that you do have seem to be ones of pain and trauma and more pain and more trauma, which understandably and naturally further that distance between you and your ancestors because what you do know and what you have experienced are not always safe. And that is very real. I wonder who else in your family has endured this kind of trauma and who also wanted to cut off their family ties but couldn't or didn't for whatever reasons. It may be one person, maybe just one, or it could be multiple. You never know. But I really do feel like you're not alone in this. And maybe they even helped you make the decision to cut off your family and create that different narrative, that different life that you're living right now. So I really do think, like, yeah, you are absolutely looked out for. And sometimes with for myself, I kind of imagine myself in like a Disney movie or like
That's
maybe not
perfect.
even
I know this person. That's exactly what she needs to hear.
I imagine maybe not myself in a Disney movie, but I imagine a Disney movie, a cute little period piece in like a pre-colonial setting, ideally, where like this person, the main character, is just kind of an outcast and they don't really feel aligned with, I don't know, whatever teachings are being passed on or whatever, like the dynamics within the community are happening. And I always envision that person, one, definitely having ADHD. I don't even know. Is ADHD like a colonial thing that was created because it's a response to oppression? I don't know. Anyway, but I imagine them just being like, like I feel so disconnected and I don't want to be here and I feel like I'm being called to do something else and I just want to explore and all these things, that kind of storyline. So when I think about my ancestors who I don't know, whose stories I don't know. That is a story that I'm kind of playing in my head. And that's who I'm calling on. This person who is me, like part of their story, part of their spirit continues to live on in me. And what do we do about it? Um, yeah. So if that helps to envision somebody far off, or maybe not even that far off, who has a very similar story to you, who wanted the same things as you do, but didn't get to live out. I feel like that kind of ancestor is the one that guides you, the one that looks out for you, the one that holds you, the one who also felt alone and isolated, but they had their ancestors to look after too. And I think we said this in the last episode, but ancestors don't always have to be people either. They could be animals, they could be trees and plants, they could be the elements, the directions. Like it can be so much. They could be bugs, mushrooms. They're definitely mushrooms. um, yeah, like you are so connected and so held. And I resonate deeply with that experience of like not having that connection and almost feeling like you have to build it out from nothing. So in this way, let grief be a portal for you. When you grieve, you help them grieve too. When you heal, you help them heal too. So this might be how you find the ancestors who do have your best interest in mind, who are looking out for you and guiding you and protecting you, who aren't judging you, who are laughing with you, dancing with you, and just like enjoying life with you. But yeah, that is Golden Seal. That is the Five of Cups, the Five of Water, and all that good stuff.
Ooh, that's so beautiful. And I really hope that this resonates with you, listener, because I hear so many things that I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's perfect. For you, that's perfect. I wanted to come in with a little bit of astrology and, name, I think there's two dynamics that are at play here. I think that the person who wrote in, I think she knows a lot of what you said, and I think she sees it in the same way. I've known this person for forever, so I'm like, I feel like a little confident in saying that. I don't typically would say that otherwise. But um, I think that she has a Virgo rising, and that means that in order for her to believe something, you kind of have to feel like you have the whole picture of it and you have the details and you have the list of how it's possible and you have the connections that you can make in your mind because you're a Gemini. So you're like, where's the data that I can use to form connections that I can use to believe this to be true? And, you know, that's not what Stevie's giving you, right? And what I think is really interesting is on the other side of that Virgo rising, um, you also have your Saturn and your moon conjunct together in Pisces in the sixth house. And sixth house has to do with what we do in a day. It's like the errands that we have to run, it's where our time goes, especially the time that doesn't quite belong to us. So a lot of times we associate it with the job that pays the bills, that maybe isn't our passion, but it's getting us through the day. Just all those tasks that we have to kind of do to be of service to ourselves and maybe to be of service to other people. Whether we want to do it or not, it's like a need to get done kind of thing. And I think having Saturn there and having it in Pisces and having your Saturn return be concluding, you're about halfway through your Saturn return, um, all of that astrology gibberish to say that the answers that you're looking for are not going to be found in rational data points that you can trace through like a genealogy thing or, anything that's kind of like material or rational or data-based, evidence-based. It's going to be found in your imagination because, the opposite of data, the opposite of what is tangibly real is what is imagined. And so that is Virgo, tangibly real, imagined Pisces. And so I think it's really important to not think about ancestors in such a literal way and to instead think of ancestors as an imaginative jumping off point. So I loved the Disney analogy of a Disney princess because I think that that's a really powerful place to start and to imagine, what is it like? You could draw it out, you could journal it out, you could call me and tell me on the phone what you think. Um, but just imagine, who is that ancestor who was the Disney princess who was locked away and couldn't leave, and dreamed one day of you who did leave. So I really wanted to offer that as like, you know, temper your expectations in the rational way of thinking a little bit and embrace, your imaginative creativity because you have an incredible imagination and really allow it to lead you uh, to a level of understanding on this topic that is not sourced from data that you can access in like our real world. Um, and trust that, you know, the idea that you're making it up, it's your imagination and therefore it's not real, you would be surprised at how often creative genius, imagination is something flowing to us from this like universal connectedness, which again, this is all very Pisces, very woo-woo. And for all you know, that flow of connectedness, that flow of inspiration that sparks your imagination is coming from your ancestors. And maybe that is the way that your ancestors speak to you because, you know, to get to where you are today, your ancestors had to dream pretty dang big. And I know that that's like in a harsh contrast to the people that you come from that you know about, and you may not feel like they dream very big. But in order for you to get here, somebody had to dream that it was possible. And maybe that somebody was you, right? A past version of you. And that's like the other thing I wanted to name was that I think there's a little bit of an inner child piece here too, because when Stevie was saying, like, imagine an ancestor who wanted to leave but couldn't. That was you as a child. You wanted to leave, but you couldn't. And here you are today. You're making the child version of you's dreams come true. And of course, it doesn't look like the child version of you wanted it to, right? It never plays out the way we want it to, but that doesn't make it any less real, and that doesn't make it any less true. So you can honor that past version of you as an ancestor as well. The last thing I wanted to say was that what I love about you having Saturn in your sixth house and you being so different to the people that has come before you, especially the people that you know of, is that you chose, oh, Leo. Hi, Leo. Anyway, you chose to do something different than where you came from, than what you were exposed to, than what you knew. And it was all of your little choices that added up to big choices that created this life that you live now that is so deeply disconnected. And I just wanted to name that it becomes much harder slash maybe even impossible to make the choices that you did and to have the success that you've had when it comes to leaving and breaking that cycle and breaking those connections when you are entrenched in those dynamics. And so your ability to remove yourself from those situations is a product of all of the little choices that you made from, the moment you started making those choices, regardless of what age that was or how much agency you had at the time. All those little choices that you made added up to you being able to create a whole new life for yourself that was so different than the people that came before you. And I think that part of ancestor work doesn't have to exclusively lay in the idea of I'm venerating and honoring what my ancestors did and who they were. A lot of it can be I am honoring myself for choosing what they didn't and choosing what they couldn't. And so part of ancestor work for you could look like really valuing and honoring and venerating, worshiping, praying to, showing gratitude for, and celebrating the choices that you made. Um, because they led you here. And, here is so far from where you came from. And that is something that should be celebrated because you did that on your own. That was all you. And it's so valuable. And I think it's really important to hold on to the fact that it was a choice that you made. And it was choices that you made that added up to that ability to choose something different. And that's the most healing thing there is. So, congrats. Any final thoughts, Stevie?
That was perfect. Oh, wait, I do have one final thought. A song on the topic of Disney. You know, obviously there are so many songs to choose from, but the one that is like in my head on full blast is Go the Distance from Hercules. I just watched it again last week, but I think it is a very, mm, hi Leo, pertinent song. He's a little more aggressive with his tail wagging.
You can't hear it for listeners, but Stevie's cat number two, Leo, is like flapping his tail in Stevie's face.
In my eye. Yeah, he's funny. Okay, that was my last thought on that. My yeah, song wreck.
I love it.
He just hit me.
That was like a whack. That was a powerful tail.
He moves his tail like a scorpion, I'm sure, when he's like, okay, okay. Are we ready for our next question?
Let's do it.
I think one question I had was how to honor the efforts my ancestors have put in and recognize that their pain and trauma still lives in my body, as well as how to show them gratitude for their guidance. Also, how do I know if something is a sign from my ancestors? I guess this is along the lines of seeking connection with them. There's so much there. These are really important, in Truth's word, juicy questions. Um, yeah, okay, we'll just get into it. The card that I pulled for this, let me get it, is the hija of fire. Hija means daughter, and that is with the California poppy. Hooray! Um, which would translate to the Page of Wands. So the description is magical objects lie on a bright yellow table. A stuffed tiger, a glitter wand, a small cauldron, and a mortar and pestle. Pictures of poppy plants are scattered about like oracle cards. Real flowers frame the edge of the table. A child wraps her dirt stained fingers adorned with flashy jewels around an amber gazing ball. Okay, okay, okay. For this card, I want to say approach this connection with them with like the playfulness of a little kid. Kind of like this kid in the card. She's playing around. She's got like that plastic jewelry. She's pretending to be, oh, I don't know. She might be an actual psychic. Who knows? But she's like having fun with it. She's making a mess. She's playing around. She's getting her hands dirty. Um, so yeah, approach this connection with your ancestors with the playfulness of a little kid. Imagine your inner child playing with their inner children too. Use your imagination, be creative, use the things that you have immediately available too. Even if that means like wild crafting, getting flowers, getting grass, looking at bugs, that kind of stuff. Um, I know that there's a lot of pain and trauma that you're bringing in, and I do want to affirm that. And I want to invite you to connect with the innocence of your ancestors. Like again, they're inner children. I don't know. I feel like kids are born, babies, kids, like they're just so pure. They're playful, they're curious about the world, they're really in tune with what's going on around them. And dang, all they want to do is just play. And then you get bogged down with like the reality of life. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know your ancestors. I don't know what that ancestral story or history looks like, but I imagine if there's pain and trauma, at some point your ancestors were immersed in that themselves, in dysfunction, in pain, in trauma, and all these different things that kind of took that innocence away from them, that removed their ability to play and to connect and to lollygag, dilly dally, and like use their imagination. That is still very much in there. Maybe it was taken from them. Maybe they had to suppress it. Um, I know you're saying that like pain and trauma, like it's there. It's in that bloodline. It's in actions and different stories. And I don't want to absolve them from that either, because that is also a very important piece to the story. But when you are wanting to connect with them and offer gratitude, in addition to acknowledging those things, yeah, I encourage you to use some playfulness, creativity, imagination. Let your inner child connect with their innocence, their playfulness. Yeah. What do you think, Shroot?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like so spot on with the chart because um our listener has uh Pluto in the second house in Sagittarius, which has to do with so Pluto has to do with our matrilineal wounds specifically. And it is up our ancestral lineage, the mothers that raised us, that birthed us, that we are here today because of the space that they held for us to be here. And the pain that our matrilineal lineages have endured through patriarchy, especially, and the very special flavors of ways that that has shaped people's lives, regardless of where they have moved to and lived. It is still kind of a common thread that is experienced, and the consequences of patriarchy and its effects on these mothers and the wounds that it causes is swept under the rug. And I think that um, in the case of our listener, it's really important to bring that playful energy to connection with their ancestors because, um, you know, culturally speaking, a lot of people's foremothers didn't have the capacity to be a child, didn't have the capacity to hold that carefree energy and just be playful and curious and a little bit destructive and not fear so much for consequences or fear what other people might think or fear expectations that are put on them at very young ages. And it would not surprise me if our listener also struggles with having a lineage of people, especially mothers, who did not have the choice to be a child and did not have the choice to engage in that kind of playful activity. And maybe if in adulthood they've had access to that, they've not known what to do with it, or they have still been bogged down by the responsibilities that are on their plate. And so it's a really powerful way to connect with your ancestors, to offer them playfulness and curiosity as like medicine, to offer it as like, hey, like, you know, you didn't get to do this, but through me, you can experience it. And cultivating that kind of energy for your ancestors to be able to access, it's not something that they can access unless you open that door for them. So I know in the last question, Stevie mentioned that grief is a portal. So your grief for what your ancestors did not have or lost access to or were barred from being able to experience can be a window into their ability to experience it through you. So it's important to take time out of your life to be in that energy of playfulness and curiosity and like a freedom from those patriarchal obligations to being a caretaker of other people, being responsible for the well-being of others, and that kind of thing. So really enjoy that kind of period of your life, where that's not on your plate as a responsibility, and offer that enjoyment as medicine to your ancestors, as a point of gratitude to say, thank you for bringing me here. I do this for us. And really hold that close to you. So I love it. Any thoughts, Stevie?
No thoughts because Maya's chasing a fly, which I know he will
Perfect.
eat.
Perfect.
No, that was beautiful and perfect. I love that.
Awesome. Well, those are our questions for you. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, Steve?
I love getting questions from y'all. I love to know what's on your mind, and I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about truth. And it I do feel like through the questions we do get to kind of build community together and hold that space for each other. Not just like me and Shrute, but whoever else is listening. You never know who resonates with this and who needs to hear whatever these answers are, or even what the questions are, to be able to put these questions into words. Yeah. So thank you for sending them. Please continue to send them. I want them.
Yes, absolutely. You could email us, you could DM us. Both links are in our show notes. And I just want to name too that, a lot of times when people write in questions to us, they're feeling alone in that experience. And so if you are listening and you resonate with what's being said, to either the person asking or to the answers, um, feel free to reach out to us via email or Instagram DM and, let's share that, with the community because I think it would be really supportive to, the people who wrote in to see that other people are in that situation with them and that they're not alone navigating this. So, we can share it on our Instagram stories, anon, it can be not anon, it's totally up to you. But I think that there's a really important piece here when it comes to, you know, blooming in the dark and when it comes to alchemizing our pain into something beautiful together. When the together part is put into action. And so, you're listening to this in your life, doing what you're doing, whether you're driving somewhere or you're doing chores or, however you're listening to this podcast or watching us, you're on your little solo journey in life, chugging along. And I think it's helpful to know that there are people just like you who are experiencing the same thing, maybe in a slightly different way. And so we would love to be a space to facilitate that kind of acknowledgement of community support. Like, hey, me too. I'm going through it as well. And you know, send a little bit of appreciation. If you're a listener who resonated with one of these questions, send a little bit of appreciation to the person who asked it because, it's always nice to show that appreciation for the recognition that, hey, I'm not alone. And that's definitely the goal of this podcast is for you to understand that, as alone as you may feel, especially in this like hyper isolating world right now, is that there are at least, dozens of other people out there feeling it with you. So we are not alone, we are together. And I would love to be able to share and exchange that togetherness with everybody. So feel free to write into us. We would love to share. And where can we find you, Stevie?
Okay. Y'all can find me on Instagram and TikTok at cosmic.return. You can also book a tarot reading with me or a Reiki session with me. Both can be done virtually, and I'd love to hold that space for you. Yay. What about you,
Yeah.
Shoot?
You can find me on all the social medias, especially Instagram and TikTok at Shrew Trees. That's SHRUTREES. And you can also book an astrology reading with me. You can find that link in our show notes. And I would love to chat, ancestry, death. There's a lot that our chart can tell us about how to be in relationship to these elements of our experience. And we also offer that as, a major staple of what our Dance with Datura joint reading offers, where we do joint tarot and astrology to kind of illuminate whatever you're ruminating about, whatever you're feeling a lot of difficulty or heaviness around. We're here to open the blinds, let some light in, and come sit on the floor of, whatever you're struggling with you and create some space to see where you think you can choose to do something different. So you can book the link to our joint reading in our show notes as well. And it was lovely to connect with you all. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for writing in. We really appreciate you all, and we are excited to be in community with you. So we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye, y'all. See you next Tuesday.